Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is another Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies.
They're dropping like flies.
Listen, people are dropping like flies out there.
I am
Boop.
pissed off.
We're dropping like flies around here.
We're dropping like flies here.
Jeez, sir, 2 more just went down. Dropping like flies.
Too many people around here been dropping like flies already, and where's that getting us, huh? Nowhere. Fast.
Biden's being Biden's being extremist.
Crush that fly.
I'm going to do a little bit different of an introduction today. I'm going to start with this. This is an experiment. My wife was reading this last night, and she told me about it, and we talked about it for a little bit. And then we were watching TV or doing whatever, and then we both came back and said, boy, that's really, we were both thinking about it separately. And what this is this guy, Richter, first took a dozen rats, put them in jars filled with water as a scientist, and watched them drown. That's how this starts off. The glass was very large, therefore the rats couldn't cling to its sides or jump up out of it. On average, they'd give up and sink for 15 minutes. Then Richter reran the experiment, but with a twist. Right before they gave up due to the exhaustion, the researchers would pluck them out, dry them off, let them rest for a few minutes, then put them back in for a second round of treading water. In the second try, after they swam until failure only a short few minutes earlier, they lasted for 60 hours. Richter's results showed that removing or saving the rats just before drowning allowed those same rats to swim approximately 240 times longer the next time they were put in the bucket. One rat even lasted an astonishing 81 hours. The conclusion drawn was that since the rats believed that they would eventually be rescued, they pushed their bodies way past what they previously thought was possible. Now, on one level, there's a little bit something interesting here. Here is the experiment. Drowning rats, psychological experiments. Drowning rats, the experiments of hope. The remarkable power of hope, psychology today. And here's some of these. There's psychology today, which has always got twisted stuff in it, which is kind of interesting. So this happened in the 1950s. He conducted a gruesome experiment with domesticated rats, and, they talk about how hope is a part of this thing, right? And here's something on Facebook.
A professor did a famous drowning rats psychology experiment. This experiment, though cruel, demonstrated the power of hope and
Though cruel, demonstrated the power of hope. And so I want to talk about how effed up this is. And there's a larger point I was already thinking about before my wife showed me this experiment. So the first part is, I don't have a problem with killing rats. If they're competing with your food, you can have a rat infestation. Rats get very bold. My brother said that in Vietnam, the rats were a huge problem. And like a newbie would come in, a new soldier would come in and leave like open food or a can with some food left in it, and there would be 50 rats at the tent or wherever they were sleeping. And that there was a whole rat thing. Like rats were a presence in your existence in Vietnam. I saw rats crawling around when I was in India, big ones, like big giant rats. Late at night, in places that I was, there was some in the bathroom that you're getting access to the water right near the place I was sleeping. And a rat ran through our flat when we were in India, a big one. Was stuck in there. It was just running around. We were trying to get it out and, kill it. Rodents make up 40% of all mammal life, almost half of all the mammals we have. All these, we're mammals, right? You think about overpopulation of humans, So what does that mean? If there's an estimated 25 billion rodents in the world, and so they'll let you know the amount of rodents. 7 billion rats. There's as many rats as people, and so rats are in some ways in competition with us for food, taking people's food, your food storage. And we have this with mice coming in and taking our chickens' food. We have hundreds upon hundreds of them. And they can get overpopulated. I talked about this thing that happens in Bangladesh. There was bamboo flowers every 40 to 50 years, depending on the species. And when it flowers, it all dies, like everywhere in the world. Like if you take some bamboo and take it from China or Bangladesh or India or someplace and grow it in America, you take some of the rhizome, the root system, it will die the same time in America as it dies wherever you got it from. It has because that keeps bamboo from, which is very invasive, from spreading over and taking over the world. It all dies, and then it seeds out. And these seeds, rats love as a food source. And there's so many seeds that the rat population grew to where they had 10,000 rats per acre. And as soon as the seed source, food source ran out, the bamboo seed source, food source ran out, it would be harvest time, and the rats would descend into the fields and eat the people's food, and there was mass famine. They had famine every 45 years, 50 years, but no one was around to talk about why that was. Like, they didn't understand why this was happening every 50-something years. It was because of the bamboo seeding and the rats' explosion in population. They were killing the rats, and there was like piles of rats carcasses like 15 feet high, right? So this is, an issue where people survive. Well, of course, rats have been credited with the bubonic plague and other things. And so I don't have a problem with people killing rats or rodents, or me personally doing it. I don't have an issue with it because of, in some ways, they are like infesting the world the same way people are in our overpopulation. There's always the chance of mammals getting overpopulated, population density. And some people even use them as food source in desperate situations. So it isn't like I like rats, because I don't. I read this thing on rats when I was a kid. It was an article on the front page of Time magazine. My dad subscribed to Time magazine, and I was always interested in animals. And it talked about how rats would probably survive pretty much any apocalypse. Because of their gestation period of only 25 or 30 days, all these mammals, these rodents, that they would reproduce quick enough to adapt and evolve to any sort of like nuclear radiation type of situation. So let's say radiation poisoning was killing them 40 days, they'd still have time to have babies and raise them, whatever it was. And, talked about all the ways that they can survive, that a big rat can fit through a hole the size of a quarter, and just all of it. They're a very resilient species. So having said all that, how effed up is this experiment? Like, to do it in a cold-hearted scientific way. I mean, think about this experiment and the way it disrespects these rats. I mean, nature, God, that you would say, all right, let's put rats in something like a glass like this. I mean, where's this idea even come from? Let's drown some rats, give them hope, and see if they take longer. And so there's that aspect of it, where the idea came from that you think it's okay to drown rats, not because they're competing for your food or you're going to eat them, or, some reason that would be, I don't know, more acceptable. But you just be murdering these rats and studying them, putting them in a situation like this. I mean, drowning them. But what's even worse is, why let them get to 60 hours or 80 hours in the one case? It's obvious that your experiment worked. That that there's some sort of hope or they expect it to be rescued, they would exceed their original efforts of 15 minutes. So after 1 hour, your experiment's a success. You can save the rats, right? Right? You don't have to drown them. Like you can use them for some other cruel experiment. I mean, which is what these rats are being bred for. One's experiment or another. And so, like after 2 hours, I mean, you don't have to, wait for the full 60 hours. 60 hours is almost 3 days. So you went to bed, the rats were still churning away, waiting to be saved. And then you went to bed again, and you woke up, and then almost a whole day went by, and they're still churning away in there. So you've slept twice while they're stuck in some tube. You've proved your point. There's hope in the rats, or whatever you want to say. That hope made them exceed their original efforts by many times. You didn't have to kill them. Like, you don't have to kill them the second time. I mean, it's just the cruelty here. And these animals swimming away expecting to be saved because you saved them the first time. And the choice to experiment on something like this, it also speaks to, they'd like to do this with humans. This cold-hearted nature of science, scientific nature. There's no reason for this knowledge, right? That hope gives you the ability to endure things. We already know that. That when people have hope or even false hope, they can endure things that are, in a way, I mean, hope's what keeps you going. Almost everybody has to have some false hope in their life or even real hope. And, being in desperate circumstances. And it keeps you going, right? You can achieve things when you have hope, and you don't need to be rescued as a person because you can imagine hope. We know about false hope. We know about people's ability to hope. And so you don't need to even do this experiment. Like I could have told you right off the bat. We all know that hope has, helped people endure things, desperate circumstances, and even false hope where their life is prolonged even though there's actually no hope, right? Instilling hope, it's already a part of the psychological, when I took my, I have a master's degree in counseling. And one of the guys we study, and I can't remember his name because it's not important, but he was, he was a guy who did group therapy. He was one of the people who developed group therapy. And one of his healing factors, he had all these things that were healing factors that help people heal. And one of them was installing hope, right? Bringing hope into a person's experience. There had to be hope, and I don't even know how I feel about hope, but I've talked about hopium so much. But there had to be hope for someone to see that they could solve a problem. Like, you have to have hope. You have to have it. If you didn't have any hope, you wouldn't even try. You have to have the belief that there's change is possible and that there's a solution. And so you don't need to do this experiment, right? And it doesn't really have much value. And it's cruel. Like, everyone's acknowledging it's a, horrible experiment. And these things were done in the 50s. And it's like people have evolved, but we haven't. Science isn't evolved. We know that they've experimented on people like they did with the African-American people with Tuskegee. And that's just one of many experiments. We've seen all the ones that they've done in terms of mind control. A video just popped up on my feed for YouTube where a doctor gave a housewife LSD. And she's just this prim and proper 1960s housewife who's on LSD, and she's talking to the guy. He's asking her what she feels. Like, the LSD mind control experiments. There's one, I have a photo of it somewhere. I'm not going to go find it. But it's a box where they put a box with leaves in it. And they had a rod in it, like a pole that was laying horizontal. It's called the horizontal leaf experiment or something. and the room tilts. And they would get people on LSD and tilt the room, and the pole would stay level. And, so they were warping their reality. And then they would study what happened to the people, right? Like there's all these weird mind control LSD experiments they did. And, it's just the demonic nature of science, the cold-hearted nature of science. I've talked about there's a great video out there about how that in ancient India, the scientists were also saints. They were rishis. They were connected to God. And somehow we've divided religious people, spiritual people, on one side and science on the other. And science and spirituality should go hand in hand. The study of the material world with the connection to God in the spiritual world. The study of the spiritual and the material should be part of everybody's life. Because we have bodies, but we have souls too. And so you should have both things. But this is soulless. This, professor, that he'd be drowning rats and not feel anything about it, right? So I was already thinking about this, and this experiment's just an excellent example of what I was thinking about. And that is, what line are you willing to cross? What line are we willing to cross as a species to keep our system going? Because we've reached a level of selfishness as a people. Because this isn't just about survival. And even with survival, there's limits to what you can do and not do. There's limits of what you should do and not do. Some of the weapons that we've created, the nuclear weapons and biological weapons and things that they're creating, that you're willing to destroy the whole planet for your, I don't know what, because you don't want to lose. I mean, you've already lost, right? Like we can do irreparable damage to the planet if a nuclear war ensues, or some of these disastrous weapons, some of the chemical weapons they would release. Well, and you say evil people are going to get nuclear weapons, so we need them first because we're good people, and if we have them, we can stop the evil people from using them because no one's going to use them because using them would mean the end of the world, and that's the situation we're in now. There's things you just shouldn't do. There's things that you should just say, all right, it's better off we all die, humanity, than cross this line to survive. We all have a survival instinct, and it's a part of our, makeup here on the planet Earth that we should proliferate, right? We should breed and have more, whatever it is, of our species, and that we should work to survive. Every day is a work to survive. Every day we wake up and do things that we need to do to survive, eat, and all the other things that go with it, right? And so, that's there. And we're supposed to have that, but inevitably we're going to die. And we shouldn't cross the line to survive as a species, as an individual. There's things you just shouldn't do. Accepting your own mortality, because we also have a higher consciousness and understanding, and can have an understanding that there is more than just this life. For our soul, we have a consciousness and awareness of a soul and these other things, which I guess many scientists don't have because they're completely materially oriented. So we have that, and we should, realize, all right, we're not going to do this. This crosses a line, and that's just survival. But what I'm talking about here is comforts and lifestyle, which is maybe mentally a part of our survival, but in reality, it's just comforts and lifestyle. And much of what we do that crosses the line is about not just maintaining our lifestyle, but having a better lifestyle, having more money. And examples of this, people came to California, white people came to California. The natives have left the redwood trees alone, the native populations, but white people, European people came to California and looked at these incredible trees. And if you've been to the redwood forests and you see these trees, and, I went to the one with the thickest trees, like the densest trees. I think it's called Sequoia National Park. You have to go up. They are higher elevated trees, right? They're up in the 7,000 feet range. I went there with my kids, and they're phenomenal. Like, you look at the trees, and I mean, they're so ancient, and so massive, and this is not just these trees, but when Americans, people from Europe came to America in the first into Eastern America, they had these giant chestnut trees that were monstrous. Of course, there was a Dutch elm disease that was brought in that wiped out the trees completely, but they started just cutting them down. And, in Europe, they had cut down all their trees. There's all these countries in Europe that doesn't have any old growth trees. Maybe they're growing some back, but at some point in their existence, they cut them down. Just like there was almost no trees in these smaller countries. They were just cutting everything down and harvesting these resources. And they're not all for you. They're not all for us. Yeah, maybe you can make a case to cut down what you need on a very frugal basis. But cutting down all the trees, right, for whatever exportation of goods and things, and I was talking about this PBS show where they had people who were acting out in a reality show like they were an American colony, a British colony in America. And they all had these roles and jobs to perform. And the colony was supported by some sort of financial institution in England. So this is going back to, pioneer days, like a pioneering colony as a reality TV show. And they owed money to the corporations back home in form of supplies. Like they had to harvest things in America and ship it back to England. And one of the big things was trees. They were supposed to cut down so many trees and send them back. And these people were supposed to do it in the show, and they couldn't keep up with the demand. Like they just didn't have the work ethic to send back. Like they were in debt. They weren't paying their bills for their colony, for their transport over to America. They got passage on these boats so that they would deliver goods back to England. And a big part of that was cutting down trees and shipping them back because, England, these countries were out of wood, right? And so, like when you get into those kind of decisions where you're cutting things down for profit, you're harvesting resources, and it's detrimental to other species, there's a spirit behind all life. God is in everything. And so there's trees there that have their own spiritual energy. Everything has its etheric roots that manifest into a material thing. And so, you have to ask the spirit and ask the divinity within yourself whether something's permittable or not. We have permission to do something because there was this manifest destiny that was just wrong. It doesn't exist. It's not true that people have dominion. God has given people dominion over the earth, and we can do whatever we want with it. That was the thinking behind the wiping out of the indigenous people, the taking of slaves, all the Christians who believe that the only way to heaven is through Christ. And so everything that they were doing and indoctrinating people with missionaries was to save people, and none of those things are true. And the religion is just okay. Like the teachings in the Bible, the Old Testament sucks. The New Testament is, it's good, but it's not great. It's a stepping stone. It's it's an entry level, religion 101 to eventually graduate into spirituality. So it was wrong thinking the whole way around it. They thought that this thing was better than it was. It was based on lies and religious profit and religious power. And, the King of England has this, whoever's the monarch is this idea that they are the God's representative on earth by virtue of their inbred and demented bloodline, that they have dominion over this earth, and whatever they say is coming directly from God. I mean, that's the position that the King and the Queen of England are in, right? Whoever's the monarch is. And so this is an important distinction in the Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies, because I believe what we're experiencing now is a result of an experiment. Everything to do with COVID and, the boop and all the rest of it is an experiment, right? Or it comes from an experiment, and depopulation is part of the agenda. So that's, one way or another, they are concerned about population growth and are doing things to reduce the population. Wi-Fi and 5G and things like this, all to me are a part of that, a way to reduce population. And I think the numbers will bear out as we see this already happening, where the birth rate has gone down. And there's a lot of factors that they aren't telling you about. And so, that is, I guess, ultimately a positive thing, because we are destroying the planet collectively, and human life has gotten out of control in terms of our consumption level. The problem is the people who consume the most, the people with the biggest footprints, are the ones controlling the experiment and are immune. That genetic line of people who are greedy and selfish to levels that we can't even understand are the ones who are making sure their genetic makeup, their genetic line is moves on to the future, and they're the worst. They're the people that their genetics, they should be extricated out of the system. They're too selfish, they're too greedy, they're too insane, they're too inbred, they're too completely effed up in ways that, again, we can't even imagine, and they're an abomination, and they're the ones that are making sure that their genetics move forward, and they really shouldn't, right? Because they're not the best of the best. In many ways, they're the worst of the worst. But either way, when you do experiments like this on what you consider lesser species, lesser people in some circumstances, you're saying that somebody who's more intelligent or a species that's more evolved has the right to torture animals, and this drowning experiment and so many others. And you're setting a precedent that greater beings, ones that are more evolved, have the right to experiment with more primitive animals. And there's so much evidence out there that there are beings, there are other civilizations, either of humans or humanoids or something like it, that are far more evolved than we are, right? Like, they're just more advanced. And that we're part of their experiment. We were genetically manipulated in test tubes or whatever. There was a slave race that was created. I mean, I've documented this and talked about this theory in other videos. That's what I believe has happened. And you're opening up this idea that you can be experimented on because that's what you believe. As a scientist, you believe it's okay for the higher to experiment on the lower. You're opening yourself up. It's like becoming part of the food chain. You're opening yourself up to that, right? That there are beings that are superior, and they can come down and probe us and do whatever they want because we're doing that to other creatures, that we see that this way of being is this disrespectful way of treating nature and our brothers and sisters. And I'm not talking about killing animals, because I believe that that's, in the right circumstances, okay to do. You can debate the morality of eating meat, things like this, but there needs to be population control of all species. And like I said, rats and rodents make up 40%. In plant life, you have these dense, lush jungles and things in places, and if you want to carve out an area to live or whatever, you can cut down some of the vegetation. There's plenty of it, right? And it's not immoral to use what God's created. We're all participating in this. When we die, our bodies are consumed by nature, right? We're all a part of that cycle. We all get, eaten on some level. Microbes eat our flesh, tiny microbes and things. And, we're left as just a skeleton, and even that breaks down, and the minerals become part of the earth so other things can grow. Most of us our physical bodies end up, at least partially, in some sort of, plant life. If we're burned, cremated, which there's a good case for that because of the toxicity. You can make a case for that. Even our ashes, they become a part of something, right? And so everything is recycled. We're all part of each other. Everything in this planet has something, other things in it. Other, whether you've eaten plants or other creatures, or you're breathing in microbes, and we have things living in our body, microbes and things that aren't human. They're not human cells. They're foreign creatures, right there. And so, all these things. We're all part of a collective. And, whatever is necessary for, a person or a being or a creature to survive, anything that you need, you can take, right? You can take what you need, not what you want. Your desires are infinite. Your needs are finite. And so nature can support your needs. The planet can support your needs, but not your desires. Your desires can be infinite. And so we've reached past the, just taking what we need long time ago, like hundreds of, thousands of years ago. And we've become desire-based creatures that are just hoarding and gorging ourselves on resources and destroying things for no reason even, and putting the whole planet at risk. And so, it's long past what's appropriate and what's natural and what we have permission to do. And somebody connected to God, you feel it. Every once in a while you look at something and you're like, wow, this is unnecessary, right? Like, this is just, you don't see it all the time, and we're just used to it. There was a time, the second master of the Sajmark meditation system that I do, Babaji, was a very simple person, someone who was like in such a spiritual state that he was in a state of like innocence. And he traveled to Europe, and he was sitting down to eat dinner with the, I think it was in Denmark, with these Danish people. And they gave him a paper napkin. And he looked at it, he said, "What's this?" And they were like, "It's a disposable napkin." And he said, "Well, what, use it once and you throw it away?" And they said, "Yeah." And he said, "Take it back. I haven't done anything to it. It's still good. I don't want to use this thing." And from his perspective, he was, it was immoral to use a paper napkin, to use something once. Like, you think about all the paper towels we use, and, that you would be processing trees just so you can, use something once and then throw it away, right? Like, he just thought that was when you had cloth and things that you could use over and over again, and, you could still do the same thing, but it would be, this was his innocent take on something he just found out about. He was like, well, this isn't right. This is immoral. The idea of, in the Sajmark system, that one definition of morality is the proper utilization of resources, to be conservative with your resources, to make conservative decisions, to not just, willy-nilly just grab and glom everything and take it because you can. Take only what you need. And we've long past that point, right? We've just gone so far over the edge. And that's why our civilization will ultimately be destroyed, because of we're so out of touch and out of tune with nature and, what we have permission to use. The gluttony of it, right? So anyways, let's move into some of the other Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies news. What I want to cover first here, one of my viewers sent me this. If you heard the original, listen to this remix to the end. I promise you will love it. Well, that's a big promise to make. I don't want to say I loved it, but I thought it was good. It's from this person named Jake Ramsey. And it starts off with this, song that's going around. And then there's three rappers, this dude. They'll never defeat us, and this dude. And I like all three of the raps. The beat actually does well. They have the music playing in the background to the song, the hook or whatever they call it. And it's, I thought it was good and well done. And, the sentiment is the same in all three cases, along with the song, which is that hardworking people are fed up with politicians and the elite people taking advantage of them and making it hard and rigging the system against them. And it seems to be universally accepted, and the song is being liked across pretty much all demographics. It's taking some minor criticism from the mainstream media or whatever, but people resonate with this message, and people usually do. In most societies, the people doing the hard work that society's built on, Because there's lots of jobs that are necessary jobs. There are jobs of growing food, right? Those are necessary jobs. You need farmers. You need food. If you don't farm, you have like a hunter-gathering situation. You need people who are going to bring food in. And so food is a necessity. We have to have food, water, basic things like this, hygienic things, cleaning. That's necessary, right? Janitorial stuff, things that are necessary to survive. And then, there are things within our society itself that there are jobs being done all the time that are, the labor jobs that are primary labor jobs that keep the system going. And the majority of those people feel underpaid, undervalued, taken advantage of, and ignored in the rest of it. And that's pretty much in any one of these modern day civilizations for the past thousands of years. Those people feel neglected and undervalued. And, housewives and mothers probably being the primary demographic here. The problem is that if you pay these people what they deserve, the society wouldn't be able to function because of the value of the work and how many people are doing this kind of work, whether it be, let's say you paid people to harvest a good wage. You have these migrant workers that harvest fruit and vegetables and things like this, right? If you paid them, a lot of these workers are undocumented. You don't have to pay health care, and they're paid under the table. The money is in tax, right? These kind of things. And if you paid these people what their value of their work is, what the, like a good living wage, the fruits and vegetables would be too expensive. And you say, well, the people in these companies could take less of a profit. The CEOs and the people who are getting overpaid for doing pretty much nothing, they're not really doing any kind of hard physical work. They might make brilliant decisions, some of them. They might do things that add value to the corporations, but most of them are replaceable and they're not special and they're making way more than they deserve. So you can take some of the money from those people, but they're not going to give it up because the only reason that they're in it is for money and to make exorbitant profit. So if they had to pay people a fair wage, they would just not do it. They would do something else. And that's the issue here. The greed isn't going to go away because it's a greed-based system. And so all you can do is write songs and complain and protest and unionize. But my wife was telling me about unions that she's aware of. The people are talking to her, like people are getting $130 an hour and things like that. Crazy amounts of money. And it makes these jobs so inflated. I mean, it's gone too far the other way. And so that's the situation, that these jobs for society to keep on functioning have to be low paid, and the people doing them have to be demeaned and undervalued and looked at like something lesser than, even though these people are the ones that are keeping the system going. You see this in like Downton Abbey with the people who are the maids and the household staff that do all the work, and these royal people just change outfits, and in fact they dress them. They don't even dress themselves, right? Like these things. And yet the people who do all the work are being less valued, and the useless people are able to just free time and do whatever they do. I mean, that's kind of a system, an up and down system. In the healthcare system, for example, you have like doctors who make a lot more money, and they have more education, but the nurses and the dental hygienists and all these people do all the work, right? You go to a dentist, and the dental hygienist makes a lot less money. They do the majority of the work, and you see the dentist at the end of the appointment, maybe, if you're lucky, and so it's just this kind of a system where the people who do the majority of the work and the harder work get less pay. And they're angry about it and feel like, these kind of songs come up from time to time around the world at different time periods. But the problem with them are, and this is what I've said in my recent Too Big to Fail, I'm showing you the video. This is a voiceover. I'm showing the video from that video on my Pockets of the Future, my first original channel. I have two channels here for people who still don't know that. But that video goes with this video and what I was saying in the beginning with the rat experiment. And that is, the system is built on greed. The lifestyle that you have is tied to greed. And the debt-based economic system where you can borrow money and build companies, you get the money before you've actually created something or done something, is key to our system and our lifestyle. And so you can take down the so-called elite, and that's been done before. You can have a revolution. You can get tired of the, bourgeoisie or whatever, whatever it is, right? The ruling class. And that's, like I said, that's historically been done. But what happens after is always the same thing. It's a system like, say, what happened in Russia, getting rid of the royal family, the czars in Russia, and then having what they have now as communism, which is even worse. They have that in China. Like, it's, you take something that's bad and then you replace it with something that's worse. And you can have a good society where everybody's valued. We've done that. Humanity's done that in the past in village-based and tribal type situations where people are all working together collectively for the good of the whole. People are selfless. They care about the tribe and they sacrifice themselves for the, for the village and the good of their family and neighbors, a family-based setup, and everybody's got to pull their weight. But those are really hard civilizations to live in terms of just for survival. And they don't have the lifestyle. They don't have the climate control. They don't have, not that I'm saying that that's somehow better. I can't, they both have their merits, right? But they live hard lives where most of their lives is about survival. They're stronger, but there's not, really much of anything in terms of technology. There's no industry. There's no, any of these things. There's no, you can travel on horses or camels or something, but that's about it, right? There's, there's no planes and automobiles. There's no cities. There's no, culture is very limited in terms of, there's some, dances and, like some tribal songs and things, and people live the same way for, thousands of years that way and don't really evolve spiritually or technologically. That's why it was easy to lure people off the farm and get them into city life, even though it's, much more unnatural what we're doing now. And so all these systems has their good points and their bad points. But if you want to get rid of the system the way it is, your lifestyle is going to go with it. If you want to dethrone the so-called elite, because the one thing I say over and over again, what they're doing right now, they don't have a choice. Like if they did, they wouldn't do it because they know the so-called elite, the controllers, know that they're putting themselves at risk by, tightening the screws and doing whatever they're doing, depopulating and this agenda that they're pushing forward. It's a necessity. Like they don't have the money. They can't pay you your Social Security. They can't make good on their promises, right? The illusion is starting to crumble. The lies, the systemic lies are starting to, be uncovered and being revealed and all these things. And, some of that's to do with the internet, but some of it's just, we've reached the end of this debt-based usury scam and they don't, they can't deliver anymore. And so they have to do something else. And that's where all this stuff is coming from. It's a desperate act by desperate people trying to save a desperate system that everyone's addicted to and dependent on, and they're dependent and addicted even more than the rest of us. And so, yeah, it's evil, but there's no choice here. There isn't a plan B, and there isn't a solution to save the system. And so this is, this agenda that they're pushing is the best that, they can come up with to try to, do damage control and reboot the system and save themselves and, whatever groups of people that are necessary for them to continue what they're doing. And so that's, that's the point we've reached here. All right, let's get into the other stuff. Okay, so Queef or Keef D facing internet charges in Tupac murder after bragging about shooting. So this is this guy, Keef D, and he's apparently, being finally the Tupac murder is solved, apparently, or at least they think they have their guy. After the blaze, coping with fire brain, research suggests that survivors of the Maui wildfires face a long road of physical and cognitive difficulties about trauma and physical effects of the fire and smoke particles. My wife sent me a bunch of stuff about celebrities painting their houses blue, and another video where blue is there's a color associated with the Maui fires. I don't know if that's true or not, but you know, there's that. Like, there's all these things, and it seems that perhaps there was something used in the fires that maybe destabilized people. At least the direct energy weapon theory out there. And so this is interesting. This guy is here's a little squirrel here you can see right there. It's crawling up on this guy as he's working in his garage. And then boom, he throws the squirrel down over there and he yells, "Boop, sucker," at the squirrel. It's just rabid squirrel just attacked him. You can see it again here. So he's just sitting there minding his own business. The squirrel seeks him out, crawls up his leg, and just goes to town. And so, I mean, there are things being caught now because everyone's videotaping stuff all the time. When I was a little kid, I went to this cemetery in Boston. Boston was about 2 hours from where I lived in Connecticut. And with my parents, it was like some famous old cemetery, historic. And there was a squirrel that crawled up my leg and was sitting on my shoulder, like they were that tame. People had fed the squirrels, and they had these tame squirrels. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And I figured I'd be back there and I'd see the squirrel again, or something, because I was a little kid, and it was a one-time experience. Rapper Young Capone confirmed dead several weeks after going missing. So that happened. The Sackler family tried to make a comeback despite despised opioids clan hit society parties. So, these are guys that came out and made $10 billion and had to pay half of that back in fines and walked away with $5 billion from OxyContin, and then set off a new opioid prescription drug epidemic. And they think that they've done their time in exile and they're starting to show up and be a part of society again, even though, they're the Sackler family. Former Houston basketball player Reggie Chaney found dead in Arlington, police say. He was 23-year-old. Chaney was found unresponsive in bedroom at home around noon. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. So it's either drug-related, and it doesn't say there was any foul play involved. And so either he had a cardiac arrest from the boop or something, or he was, he overdosed on drugs or something. Drake proudly enlists 5-year-old son Adonis to draw cover art for his new album For All the Dogs. I think Adonis is a stripper baby, and Drake denied him at first. So then he said, all right, now he's embracing his son. And he drew this. Oh, it's a devil. It's a demon. One of my viewers sent me this. This is supposed to be a dog, and this is what's on Drake's album cover. 13-year-old student killed after sticking head out of bus window hitting concrete pole. Well, that just sounds kind of stupid. So that happened. So this guy is talking about JFK's real assassin, Woody Harrelson's dad. He's playing music behind him. There's his dad there. His dad was a known CIA operative. And his dad claimed that he had, there he is there, Charles Harelson. And he made claims about being a part of JFK's assassination. Here's his interview with Barbara Walters.
You said once that you thought that your father was a CIA operative. Yes?
Yeah, he was.
How do you know? What proof?
See, I shouldn't get into this right now.
Okay.
This is where we're going to get into trouble.
But this is something that you feel and that you're trying to work on?
Oh, I know it's true, but,
Does it make a difference?
That he was trained by the CIA? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it makes a difference.
So Woody Harrelson was in a movie called Natural Born Killers, which I did not see, which is interesting. But even more interesting, he was in a video called White House Plumbers, and a TV series. And he played E. Howard Hunt. And there is a subtext that he had hired, he hired these Cuban guys. They were his guys that broke in to Watergate. And there's a lot of incompetence. They broke into Watergate 4 times. Like they had 4 failures, right? And so what's interesting about it, though, is they put the assassination on Kennedy on E. Howard Hunt. Apparently on his deathbed, he confessed. He had a deathbed confession that he was in charge of the CIA operation to kill JFK. And that came up at, various different times, right, in the TV show. And like he was threatening to use that against them when he was going to jail, all these things. And so now it comes out that Woody's dad might have been involved as well. And so, there's probably not a coincidence here. Olivia Newton-John's daughter, Chloe just forget it. Why, I'm never going to have to pronounce this person's name again unless she dies unexpectedly. She has been battling memory loss since Mom's death. She's not okay. And this is her. She's got either a filter on or she's messed up her face with plastic surgery. She plays a song. I've talked about this, my problem with people talking with music behind them, which is very distracting and off-putting. Either talk or play a song. You can't do both. Do one or the other.
I have not been okay.
She's not been okay. I'm going to mute it here. She has memory loss. I've had extreme memory loss. I have difficulty getting out of bed, and I'm stuck to my commitments. And so she talks about here, again, her face is messed up, and she doesn't have an Australian accent because I guess she lives in L.A. or something. But she's another dropping like flies person. I don't know if I showed you this already, but it's a meme someone sent me. Deaths caused by Hurricane Hillary to be labeled suicide. Kaboom! Ryan Adams has canceled fall tour dates, including November 17th at the Stifel. He's not going to the Stifel. I've covered this a lot in the last 2 years. So many musicians have been canceling their tour dates. Democrats aren't laughing about the Hunter Biden debacle anymore. There's no time to laugh. There's a time to laugh and time not to laugh, and this is not one of them. Okay, so I don't know what this is about, but apparently the Dems are starting to go south on the Hunter Biden thing. Hell on Wheels. Teen who killed boyfriend and his friend and crashed is sentenced to 15 years to life. So this is the girl here reading her apology.
I'm Davia. I'm so deeply sorry. I hope one day you can see I would never let this happen or do it on purpose. I wish I could remember what happened. I'm just so sorry. I'm heartbroken.
Okay, so what this is about is I've seen multiple articles about this. There she is crying again. And she's apparently this is the car here. So this is her and her boyfriend. And apparently they had some kind of a toxic relationship. And she was driving a car. It didn't say she was under the influence. And she, her boyfriend was in the car and the boyfriend's friend was in the car. And she decided to ram the car into a building. The judge, Nancy Russe on Monday, said that the most significant piece of evidence against Shrillela, the thriller in Shrillela, was the chilling and tragic surveillance footage which shows her accelerating to smash her Toyota Camry into the wall of a commercial building. She was going 100 miles an hour. I don't know if they were fighting. There hasn't been... she was on a mission and she executed with precision. The mission was death. And so this is what the car looked like. And she just slammed it into this building And I'm not going to show you the footage. But we were all friends, and Dom was my soulmate, she said. And so she tried to kill him, and she ended up killing him and his friend. And now she's serving 15 years to life in prison. Tori Spelling spotted with bruises as she leaves hospital after mystery illness. Now, they claim that her illness was caused by mold in the house, but now they've moved out of the house and they were somewhere else. I don't know where they were at first, and now they're in a camper, her and her like 5 kids. And she was, wow, scary looking, right? Looks like some kind of creature there. That's just, one thing I noticed. She's got bruises on her face, and I mean, talk about ghoul. She's putting the G into ghoul here. And now how can they explain this, right? And so her and her family are in sort of a crisis, or I think her husband died or something. They're divorced. I don't know what it was. But anyways, tough times for Tori. Jonah Hill's ex, Sarah Brady, claims she was put on involuntary hold. They dragged me. Jonah Hill's ex-girlfriend, Sarah Brady, has alleged that she underwent hospitalization as well as an involuntary mental hold recently. The surfer, who previously said that the Wolf on Wall Street actor 39 was emotionally abusive towards her, shared a series of shocking Instagram stories on Monday per the Daily Mail. Injected her with drugs involuntarily. Treated me like a violent animal whilst I remained a human being. They told me I was intoxicated. I told them I was not. I told them I had a mental health diagnosis. I asked for water. They did not give me any. They dragged me by my arms and strapped me down on a gurney without my consent. And so that happened. That's what she says happened. And then one of my viewers just told me this, just got in under the buzzer here. Prigozhin plane crash. So this guy, Prigozhin from the Wagner mercenary group, was in a plane and it mysteriously was fell out of the sky and crashed. And now he's dead. Nobody saw that coming, right? Okay, so let's wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.